All right, if I could have everyone please wave. Right. Go, you can sit down. It's cool. Yeah, you'll be out of shot. It's cool. All right. So, one of the many hallmarks of our modern medicine is the existence of antibiotics, which is an antimicrobial substance used to fight and kill bacteria, and it also helps reduce bacteria infections. And this was very important because beforehand, scientists had no idea what was causing bacteria infections, such as sinus infections or pneumonia. So when we learned that antibiotics can help kill bacteria, we started using a lot of antibiotics in all our food and all our medicine. And while at first this helped get rid of the weaker bacteria, what actually ended up happening is now the strong bacteria is still alive. And because the strong bacteria was still alive, being able to grow, and there was no weak bacteria to disrupt the growth of the strong bacteria, now the strong bacteria is the primary bacteria. And this has led to the rise of superbugs, bacteria that is resistant to antibiotics. Because they're resistant to antibiotics, we actually have no defenses against antibiotics, or against these superbugs with our antibiotics. And so now it becomes a question of, how can we halt the progress of superbugs without antibiotics? And so one of the proposed solutions is actually reducing the amount of antibiotics we do use and figuring out a different way to then combat the growth of the superbugs. And so today I'd like to talk about how much antibiotics are used in the US and around the world, how much antibiotics are used in the meat industry specifically, and then also how there is evidence of moderation of antibiotics. So antibiotics in the US, as we may already know, they're incredibly readily available. You can go even to pharmacies or even supermarkets will have foods with antibiotics just chock full in the food. However, this rise of antibiotics in all our foods has actually led the superbugs to actually rise way quicker, and we have no defenses against them. According to the US National Library of Medicine, the mortality rates due to these superbugs is more than 63,000 patients in the US every year die from these superbug diseases. And this is because we have no defenses against these superbugs, and it leads to a great rise of these superbugs. And so even though these superbugs are greatly rising in the US, you can only imagine how bad these superbugs would be if they get into other countries without any antibiotics, countries that never had antibiotics. Just for some clarification, according to globalissues.org, 80% of people live on less than $10 a day, which with 350 to 500 million people dying every year from malaria. So with so many people dying already from malaria, a disease that's not even a superbug, we can only imagine how if a superbug got into those countries, which are so susceptible to disease as it is. And so understanding that superbugs are developing from antibiotics, we then have to look into specific industries and how much they use antibiotics. So with the meat industry, we see a large amount of antibiotics, mostly because of livestock. So there's cows, pigs, other animals that are kept in cold, cramped conditions that are rather gross. These gross conditions allow bacteria to harbor way more. And so because of this, farmers have to use a lot of antibiotics on these animals in order to suppress the amount of bacteria that grows within them. However, because these farmers use so much antibiotics on their livestock, it's actually led this bacteria to actually grow stronger within the livestock. So the superbug is developing within animals and then being transferred into the humans. Just for some quick example, there's an antibiotic called colistin, which is mostly used in China, and colistin is a really powerful antibiotic. However, now, according to the scholarly article, newly identified colistin resistance genes, antimicrobial resistance against colistin has emerged, threatening the efficacy of the last resort antibiotic. So even colistin, which I'm sure none of you may have heard of, but colistin was really one of the only antibiotics we had left against these superbugs, and even that is not working against certain bacteria anymore. And this has to do because colistin was used so much within the livestock of animals, and because of the overuse of colistin, now it's not effective anymore. And so now that we're realizing that the overuse of antibiotics actually leads superbugs to get stronger, we have to question if maybe moderation is the best solution to this. According to the article, Prevailing Practices, antibiotic usage varied among large, medium, and small farmers. The frequency of veterinary consultancy promoted better veterinary-client relationship among large farmers. So the large farmers had more veterinarians. Because they had more veterinarians, they were using antibiotics less. It's because veterinarians could tell the farmers when to use antibiotics. The small farmers were using way more antibiotics, and this is because they had no idea when to use antibiotics, so they were just throwing it whenever they thought the cows might be getting sick. However, because the large farmers had access to good veterinarians, they knew when to use antibiotics and administer antibiotics only when the cows actually needed antibiotics, and they weren't using it overly. And so we can see that from this, there is an example of proper usage of antibiotics and how we can limit them and therefore limit the spread of superbugs. And so I know all of you liked antibiotics. They definitely reduce our infections around the world, and definitely for sure, but we have to consider how they are going to lead to the rise of superbugs. So I ask everyone to realize that we overall should limit our consumption of antibiotics and to understand that there really can be too much of a good thing. All right, thank you very much. I was like, oh yeah, keep these notes on there. Not cheating.
All right, let's go eat some beef.
We don't cheat. We don't cheat in this house.
Let's go have some beef ribs now.
I think I'll ever eat again.
That was a bad one to have grandma too.
Thanks.